Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm excited to have Adria here today, and I apologize. Y'all have to please forgive my voice. I have struggled a little bit with a cold through not New Year, through Christmas. I'm actually sounding better, so I apologize. But today is a wonderful conversation. We're going to be talking with Adria on parenting traumatized children. And she has wanted to do this subject for you. If you recognize her face, she has been the woman behind her story that we have shared all this month. So if you've been following along, you get to meet her in person and glean wisdom from her about parenting children. And so I'm really excited to learn. She's shared some of her points with me, and they sound so amazing. I'm like, oh, I needed to hear some of these things as a parent. It's just so good to be reminded of these things. And so I'm looking forward to that. So before we get started, Adria, can you introduce yourself and tell them who you are and maybe what area you're from and maybe something that you enjoy doing?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lauren, for having me. I am excited to kind of um, just share a little bit about this. This is kind of just my um, part of just my story, and I just really I wanted to talk about this just because I'm not the expert at this. I have traumatized children. I'll tell you a little bit about that. And but I don't know how to do it. But I also have been greatly helped by coming in contact with women who um, have similar stories. And for a while, it took me a long time to kind of come in contact with those women, and then it really helped me to kind of know that I wasn't alone. So I'm from live in North Georgia, right near Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I have four boys who I'll tell you a little bit more about. And um, I'm a nurse, and also God has gifted me the ability to work from home, and um, but yeah, that's I love to read. I love to listen to audiobooks right now. That's kind of what I'm works into my life. But yeah, so yeah, thank you, Lauren, for having me.
All of that sounds so awesome. I'm like, oh, you sound like such a fun person. Like, I want to hear all about your books and everything that you're reading, and that you get to work from home. That is such a blessing. I work from home as well, and it's a huge blessing in my life. So
Very
I'm glad
much.
that God has blessed you with those things, and I'm glad what you shared too about just knowing that you're not alone. Just connecting with you today is just blessing my heart. Just being able to hear these things and share them. It's just sometimes it's easy to feel like you're alone or isolated when you're walking through these challenges, but to know like somebody else sees you and understands you. And I hope today those who are listening can feel seen and understood and also walk away with some nugget of truth that just encourages you into the new year. So let's kind of
Yeah.
get started a little bit about that. And so I would you mind sharing us just a short version of your story, kind of recapping a little bit of what we've been sharing about this month?
Yeah. So I was married for 14 years, and have four boys who are now 9, 11, 13, and 15. And was um, um, in an abusive marriage. Took me a long time to realize that. And was ended up separating from my husband twice. The second time I had already come in contact with Call to Peace at that point, knew a little bit more, and realized I needed to separate for more of an extended time. The hope was for at that point was for my husband to see his need for healing and to be able to come home. Um, I My boys had in the marriage also been abused. He was very coercive, controlling, and angry, and would did a lot of emotional, psychological abuse with them, but also some physical abuse. They had that trauma growing up, and then unfortunately, after our second separation, we'd been separated for about 5 months, and um, my husband decided to take his own life, and unfortunately, he chose to do that at our house on Mother's Day while we weren't there. And so when we came home that day, we ended up finding him together, me and my boys, which was obviously, something that they should have never ever seen, and was very, very traumatic for all of us. And it's part of our story, and I it's sometimes people look at that story and it's pretty hard. And yet, um, I really want people to hear, and for what I trust and believe in, and for you guys out there, that no matter what your kids have been through, their story isn't a broken one. It's one that God is doing, God is working through, God is making them who He wants them to be through their story. Yes, do I wish that this could have happened not this way, that they would not have had to go through this stuff, they would not have had to have this be part of their story? Absolutely. Do I wish that I didn't have to see this pain in their lives? Of course, absolutely. But I believe with everything in me that God is working in their lives, and He is working something beautiful for them. And He is um, doing, creating them and making them who they want to be. I was reminded this morning at church, Isaiah 61, 1 through 3. And it's talking about Isaiah as a prophet, but also is a prophecy of Jesus. And it talks in there about the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that He may be glorified. And it was a year and a half ago that God really brought this to mind, gave me the promise that I felt for my boys, that He is creating oaks of righteousness out of them, and through their mourning, through their grief, through their trauma. So that's kind of our story. I'll talk a little bit more as we go on, kind of where they are and what that has looked like in their lives, in my life. But that's kind of a brief overview of where the trauma came from, where our trauma came from.
Wow. Every time I hear that story, it just grips my heart, and just so much hurt and betrayal and trauma for your boys. And so I can imagine, as a mother, like, you stand there and you're like, what's the first thing I do with traumatized children? What would you say to a mother? Like, what do we do? What's the first step would you recommend for her?
I think take care of yourself. Um, the I'm sure you guys have heard that when you fly an airplane, they tell you to put the mask on yourself first, and then put the mask on your children. And that's hard to do, because you're, especially in the beginning of the trauma, it's so overwhelming. But if the beginning healing of your children comes through them watching you, and so it's just super important to make sure that, even just basic things. Obviously, in the beginning, it's make sure you're drinking, making sure you're eating, making sure you're sleeping. But then as the months go on, getting into a therapy soon. Like, I honestly had the blessing of already being seeing a therapist when this happened, as were my children. And so I had that foundation, but that ended up changing to a trauma trained therapist that was able to start doing some different trauma therapies, like EMDR, et cetera. That's a whole different conversation, but that were, really helpful for me to deal with the trauma, because we talk about these parenting traumatized kids, but you've got the trauma as well. And so that's step one: take care of yourself. Make sure that you're providing for your healing. Also, I think, make sure, or seek out a group of friends, people, whether that's through your church or others, and you'll kind of identify those people, those that are able to that stick by even if they don't understand. Um, and I would then seek to nurse those relationships, give grace to them. They're not going to always know what to say. They're going to say the wrong things. But if they're the ones that are, sticking by, continuing to come by, then be intentional with those, and give them the benefit of knowing what's going on in your heart. I remember I was afraid to even talk about the trauma because I didn't want my experiences to hurt someone else. And I had people tell me, it's okay. Like we want to help you through that, and we want to be those people, and it's okay. We're okay, except hearing those stories and those memories, and that's helpful. And I think as for me, as many of you guys, as a single mom, like I couldn't go, when stuff came to brain, my stuff came to mind. I couldn't go and talk to my kids about it, and I didn't have a husband or someone that I could just say, hey, this is really, I can't get this memory out of my brain. I can't get this, this is really bothering me today or whatever. And so having, um, those friends that you can trust enough to do that is also helpful. I know that's not an easy thing to just create out of thin air. So it's something to pray for as well if it's something that doesn't currently exist. And I think then for your kids, I think getting them into therapy very soon is very important. And there's been similar stories when I was in the abusive relationship. I unfortunately had didn't have good church support around me, and so like I knew in me that my kids needed um, to be in therapy, but then I was told that if I took them to therapy, then the therapist would be required to report them, etc. So eventually, once we separated the first time, then I did get my kids into therapy, and I got some pushback because it was important to me that the therapist was good and the therapist was who connected with my children and who could give them what they needed versus necessarily them being in network with insurance. And so, and just throwing out that out there, like there are a lot of unfortunately therapists these days that don't take insurance, and I didn't have the money to pay for this. And my kids have now been in therapy for 4.5 years, and God has continued to provide for kids to be in therapists that's not covered by insurance. And so we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that God has provided for them. So trusting God through that. So I guess my point in there is just don't write off if they're not in network. Obviously, if you have insurance and there's someone that you can that is the right person for them. Also, if the first person doesn't work, the second person doesn't connect with your kid, to keep trying. That they're the importance of, I think, having that for your children is just going to take some work, and sometimes it's hard and it's overwhelming. Sometimes I feel like caring for my kids is a full-time job, and yet I have to continue to work as well. And so, it's a lot of work, but it is important to continue to advocate for them and to make sure that relationship is important, is there for them. That therapist is available for them. Thankfully,
Yeah,
since my kids were in therapy, sorry, Lauren, since they were in therapy prior to my husband's death, they were then able to, like, after that severe trauma, were able to see their therapist the same week that he died, which I'm very thankful for.
that's amazing. I love all that you shared there. And I know in your story, you also talked about you found community in your support group and at Call to Peace Ministries. We do
Mm-hmm.
offer support groups for those who are listening, and they're free of charge, of course. And so you're able to join a support group and join that. And you also had an advocate that walked alongside you and helped you process that too. And so, um,
Excuse me.
yeah, we've had a little coughs today. Is there anything you want to say regarding that as well to any women who are watching about reaching out to Call to Peace or anything?
Yeah. So I very thankful. It's one of those, like, when I separated the second time, I had at that point heard about Call to Peace, and so got connected with an advocate pretty quickly, and then also got into a support group. So I was actually had both of those things in place when my husband took his life, and so that was actually very helpful for me to just have the support group of women who they didn't understand necessarily that aspect of the death, and but they understood everything. Everything else, and they were very willing to listen and to support me and encourage me and walk along with me. And so that was hugely helpful. And then my advocate was able to come up a few days after my husband died just to love on me and pray for me. And so having that continued support. And so the advocate program is is awesome. I am actually affiliated advocate now with Call to Peace, and those services are available, as are the support groups, which are awesome. The women in my support group, we still message back and forth, and get together on Zoom occasionally, and very thankful for all those. Again, things that I felt like God kind of put in place, knowing what was going to happen, and knowing what I needed.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that too. That makes me so happy. When I hear those things and hear how God blessed you through Call to Peace and like everything you shared is so important. I think it's so important that you to highlight again how you pointed out women should take care of themselves first, and it's not selfish to put your oxygen mask on before you help your children because if you're, it's really hard to regulate your children when you're dysregulated and to comfort them when you're just filled with anxiety and chaos. And so it's very important to get grounded first, and we always teach that as well. It's not selfish. It's very good. You need to prioritize yourself, get an advocate, get in a support group, get a counselor, and everything. That's really important. So thank you so much. And I'd like to kind of get into, and you mentioned about signs of depression and anxiety in children. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Excuse me. So yeah, about my kids were in therapy, but I was just noticing with a couple of my boys, and honestly, I went to a um, a seminar. It was actually with a different ministry, a widows ministry I'm part of, and they were talking about this specifically, like signs of depression, anxiety in children, and it's not necessarily the typical, okay, they don't want to get out of bed. It's just lots of anger outbursts, emotions that are kind of going all over the place. Doing poor in school when they used to do well, having trouble with friends. It could be, not wanting to get out of bed. It could be those classic symptoms, but it might be other stuff. And so with my kids, when I heard that, I was like, oh. And so like I had a child at that point who'd had stomach aches for like 2 months, and that were not really explained by anything. And I knew, like, I felt like at that point I had a feeling that it was related to the trauma, but not that it was a sign of depression or anxiety, that there was something that we could possibly do that to help that. And so once I kind of heard that, I was like, okay, so maybe I need to get my kids seen by more than just a counselor. And so at that point is when I started reaching out to a psychiatrist and got them seen and evaluated. And it was kind of in stages for my different kids. Like the child with the stomach aches eventually got on, pretty quickly got on antidepressants. And once we got the right medication, those stomach aches pretty much went away completely. And so just, knowing that, and actually stomach pain, I learned, of course, as I go along, this is, and stomach issues are one of the most common symptoms for kids with anxiety, depression. And so just knowing that, okay, that's something that we can help and we can address. And so, and then, another child who just had a lot of anxiety over everything all the time. And we're able to get him on medicine. And so now, I mean, like medicine can be amazing. It's not to help our kids. It doesn't, it's not a miracle pill. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't make them, like walking, angels. My kids are still still traumatized, still have issues. We still working through things. We're still, and will be for their lives. Is one of the things with kids is that it's not like you've got fully developed brains that can process everything all at, and get it done with. As they grow and as their brains process and develop, the trauma impacts them differently. And so you have to help them deal with the trauma at that different level. And so knowing, that this is going to be something that we're going to walk through for the rest of their lives, essentially, until at least that their brains are, fully developed and they're adults. But yeah, so just knowing, knowing what those symptoms can be, knowing the signs can be. For my youngest child, his started to be behavioral issues, which came out in just excuse me, behavior that was just very abnormal to him, where, you know, that was more than just regular childhood disobedience or regular behaviors that you would expect from um, a young child. He was 6 when his dad took his life. And one thing to know, he didn't actually see my husband, um, but he was present with everybody else's trauma. So like he was there, he just didn't happen to see it. Um, just the way where he was in the group and how it happened. And so, but his trauma through that has been just as severe. He has eventually been diagnosed with PTSD, and which is also impacted other things. But his really started to come out in behavior where he was having extreme rages, meltdowns. He started to get violent. He started having refusing to do stuff at school where he was before. Like he, had no troubles in school. He was in kindergarten when his dad died, and kind of his behavior just kind of started like several months after. They just got progressively worse, and it's where I ended up having to call the police. And that's one thing I wanted to kind of say is like, as a single mom, and even if you're, remarried or you have, someone else there, another adult in the home, um, the police aren't our enemies. They're not something to threaten our kids with, but they are there to help us. And so the police have helped us many times. And I would call them when he was getting so aggressive that he was either going to hurt me or a sibling, or he was unsafe. And so there's been a couple times where he would run out into the road or and not come back. And so I would know that I needed help to get him safe or the other people around him safe. And so and I've had to involve the police for more than one child. And again, just that, they every time they come, different people are different, but the majority of the officers have been incredibly helpful, incredibly kind, incredibly willing to just do whatever they can to support us. And so, um, police aren't, police can be helpful. Don't let yourself get hurt or your child be unsafe. People be at risk, people in danger. But just because you're afraid to call the police, they're not going to arrest your child. They're not going to, especially young children. They're going to be there to help de-escalate the situation, help calm down, be an adult that comes in that's not, in there, and they're an authority figure. And so the child may respond to that authority. And some of the times, like by the time the police got there, he would have calmed down just because he knew that they were coming. um and and so with my youngest, we talked about, his behaviors continued to escalate. He was seeing the therapist. We got him into a psychiatrist that spring, and she started trying different medications to help him because it was obvious he just was super unhappy. And we tried multiple medicines, and eventually I had to take him to the emergency room because he was just so dysregulated. He was getting more violent, more aggressive, and so he ended up being admitted to an acute mental health hospital for 10 days at that point, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. He was 7 years old at that point, and I was leaving my kid. I had to take him, and that's one of the things with depending on where you live, the availability of hospitals. The closest place at that point was 4 hours away, and so I had to send him 4 hours away. I could only see him. Visitation was once a week. Like it was horrible. But and I, you know, um, that that hospitalization didn't fix things. But it honestly gave me some time to breathe. That wasn't why I sent him. I wouldn't have sent him just to give me some time to recover. But that's what God knew needed to happen, honestly. And but when he came home, psychiatrists identified, tried a different medicine, and it ended up being, life altering for him. And so he was a different kid for the following year. And so that's where, like where, meds can be incredibly helpful. Um, and, with him, like part of the rest of the story with him is that after a year, his meds stopped working. And so I am actually in Pennsylvania right now. I don't live here. I live in North Georgia. But about 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, my youngest was admitted to a residential treatment facility because since the end of the summer when his meds stopped working, things have been really, 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 really hard. And he's been um, just out of, and he hates it. Like he, at the end of meltdowns, he's like, "Mommy, when am I going to be normal again? When am I going to stop doing this? I don't want to do this. I don't mean to hit you." Like he's, he knows what he feels like when he's okay. And we tried all sorts of medicines, and we tried, the mental health resources are not good everywhere for young children. And so we ended up in the hospital again, and they tried to find an acute bed for him for 10 days, and they could not. So they ended up sending us home again, saying, "We're sorry." We accessed many, many, many resources at home prior to, even this instance. Um, and, but God, worked to get him where he is right now. I have, I guess walking through raising traumatized kids is trusting God, trusting that God loves them more than I do, and that He promises to give me wisdom and to help me and to guide him. And so as I'm making these decisions for my children, which are life altering decisions, and I get that, like, that is being a single mom, like that is one of the hardest things, is to know that I'm making, it's on me to make these decisions. And yet I have a heavenly father, I have an Abba father who I ask for help and I ask for guidance, and he helps me know what I need to do. And so then I trust him, say, "Okay, God, you made this happen. You've opened the doors. You have provided financing. You've provided travel arrangements. You've provided everything. Like, I trust that this is where my 9-year-old needs to be right now." I trust. And so, um, obviously, I guess, with um, traumatized kids, they can all look different. And so that's, I've got 4 different kids, who all have experienced this differently. I have another child who's also had 2 acute stays in a behavioral health hospital for kind of self-harm stuff. And so there's, I guess, the resources out there. Don't be afraid. So I guess part of what I'm saying is, don't be afraid of a mental health hospital. Both for my, he's 13. Both of his days have been positive for him. Like, he has felt, obviously the first day was more terrifying because he didn't know what was going to happen. But they've been positive. And so he has learned things from them. And my youngest willingly went to this residential facility. And so, the I think God has put these facilities, made them available. These are help. These are resources. These are possibilities. Um, you don't have to just suffer through it. If I've talked with women, and their kids are physically assaulting them. That's not okay. And we need to help our kids. We need to do what we can. Are the resources always there, mental health wise, to get them the help? Does it take a mom that is willing to work really hard? Like, it's, you know, um, fighting for your kids can be really hard. But um, keep, keep pushing, keep trying, keep, looking for those resources, seeking them out, but don't be afraid of utilizing those resources that are out there. Because I know, like, when the idea of first putting my child in a mental hospital was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done. Like, I just could not comprehend what I was doing. And there were some bumps in there, and it's, obviously not where I want my child to be. Do I want my child right now to be 750 miles away from me? No. But this is what he needs right now. He's safe. He's being taken care of. And we're able to heal. The last few months have been an additional trauma on my family, for all of us, because of his behaviors. And so, it's a process, and it's hard. But if that's similar to something that you're going through, you're not alone. And these resources for things are out there available. And Lauren, if reach out to Call to Peace, I'm more than happy to reach out, to talk with anyone that is going through this that doesn't have anyone to talk to.
That's so sweet. Yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to request to talk to Adria, I'll drop my email in the comments here. If you email me personally, um, I will connect you with Adria. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to put your email in there. Okay, so my email is dropped in the comments there. And I just appreciate all that you shared. It just brings like so many things to my heart and to my mind. And one is just if people are watching this and they're like, well, my children don't have all these struggles, or maybe they're trying to understand what it's like. Maybe they're an advocate, and it's like, don't judge people too that have been through this journey, that have walked through course of control with their children and experienced the things that her children have. You don't know what it's like to be in that situation and to have children. Sometimes you're in the grocery store and you see somebody acting up and you're just like, oh, why are they not parenting? Or you're at church. It's like, reach out and love those people and get to know their stories too, because you don't know everything that's going on in the home. And maybe that person needs you to support them and pray with them. And I think it drives home the point, the impact that what takes one parent, like Adria, a positive parent, to make a difference in a child's life, even if there's been coercive control and abuse, but still a long road. And so just the impacts of coercive control on children and what they go through is severe, and how it impacts them in your situation, it is they experienced a lot more than that, and just things. And it's been amazing, as you're saying too, you've seen so much positive too to come out. You've been such a wonderful mother there to support them. And I love when you share that they love to come sit on your bed at night and talk to you and share their feelings. And that's neat to see, like the good things that God is doing in the midst of the hard, and healing them. And I was wondering, I'm sorry I sound so raspy, everybody. I was wondering if there's anything you would like to say to a woman that's watching this today that may feel alone and isolated. What encouragement and hope would you give her today?
Yeah, I think just you're not alone. There are many women. I've learned I'm not alone. My story is not unique. There are many women who um, are struggling with their kids, who are, going, what happened to my kid? What, how do I help him? What are they doing? Like, this is not my child. What are they doing? How do I help them? How do I get through this? My child's hitting me. What, or my child that used to um, talk with me now won't look at me, or the it comes out in all different ways. But you're not alone, and one day at a time. Like, I have to tell myself all the time, and my friends know, like, I can't think beyond today. I can't look at what's going to happen tomorrow. What decisions do I need to make tomorrow? I just have to make the decision that God's asking me to make today. Do what I need to do for my child today. And so, just, yeah, look at, lean into Him, lean into your Father, as their Father, as well, and um, depend on them. I think if you're in that, Lauren, you brought up just the church. Like, if you are the person on the outside, the person that, sees the kids that are struggling, if you're in church and you see a mom struggling with her kids, um, ask her if there's anything that you can do to help. Say, I know that, things are hard. Is there something I can do to help? It may be just sitting with them. Like, I've had, and I've had to ask, like, not, it's hard for people to know what to do. hard for people to know what help we need. But just asking for someone to sit in your row with you and sit in between a couple of kids, or just having that different adult there will help sometimes, just in church. And then my youngest, when his behavior started to get just real severe, I had some women that would sit behind me and they would start praying when they saw how he was, if he was struggling, and I knew that they were doing that. And Then I also had a woman that would, um, one time, just went and sat with him out in the foyer so that I could just be in church. And he was. I've actually had several times where different child or whatever would refuse to be in church, or was having an issue or escalating, couldn't handle it, where someone else in the church would just go and sit with them so that I could be in church, um, and just rest with God. And so, yeah, be okay to ask if you're the woman dealing with it, but also be okay to, if you're on the outside and you see, um, asking, or even saying, hey, I'm more than happy to come sit with you, sit with the kids if you want, if that would help, or um, because sometimes even just in the open-ended offers, we don't know what to say. Someone says, how can I help? I might not know the answer, but if you see, hey, or just sit in their row, or just say, hey, reach out to one of the children and say, you know hey, I got some crayons or whatever, I don't know, depending on the age, but just um, connecting with the kids, and but yeah, just offering, being willing, to do things differently. And I know even my youngest, who he aged out of children's church, and the pastors were actually, before he left, were talking about, what can we do? We know he's totally dysregulated right now. Things are not okay. What can we do um, to help? Do we, other different options, different things we can do, just as a can we just have him be in children's church even though he's 9 years old? Can he help in children? What can he do just to help that? And So yeah, so just because for me, and even like I had women, there was a couple times where, for a month or so, where my youngest was, like getting in the van to go to church became an issue, and it would be different. It wasn't actual church; it was different things. But that would be a time where we struggled, and so a couple times a friend would just come over to the house. One time, she took my other kids to church until I could get him. Just different things like that. Being available to come. You know, I ended up with my youngest creating an emergency what's it called, like group on my iPhone or whatever, that I could actually just my smartwatch, tell my watch to text my emergency group saying I need help, and that was if I couldn't, I just needed someone to come to the house, someone to come and help me. So that's different ideas, being open to be those person. If you live near the person that um, being open to be on that just emergency list, just someone that could come in an instant to be that other person. Um, Sorry, we got kind of off on the sidetrack of just how do we support, but that's for those of us that aren't, those of you that aren't the mama struggling with the kids, or with the kids with trauma, but are on the outside. Those are some other ways that you can help.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing those ideas. That's great. And your church, I know, has been hugely supportive, as we read about in your story, and the things that they've been able to do. They're partnering with us as well, I believe. And so that's just exciting to see. And you're able to serve your church as an advocate and all those things. And it's neat. And before we close out, too, I want to say we're in a campaign right now. And our goal is to raise $160,000 this month. And Adria's story is part of that campaign. And with the fundraising that we're doing right now, it will allow us to continue to serve women through advocacy, through support groups, giving the community, serving their church so the church can be a safe place. As Adria's telling her story, it would be a lot harder and worse if the church wasn't supportive. It's so important for the church to be supportive and to understand how to walk with women alongside those who are in oppression. And so I just want to encourage you and challenge you to consider partnering with us today. And right now we have a $10,000 matching grant from Leslie Vernick. And so right now we're at 117,000 out of our $160,000 goal. But we're trusting and believing the Lord is going to provide. So if you've not donated yet, please consider it. Right now, every donation will be doubled. And just thank you so much, Adria, for your story. Thank you for sharing it, for your hope and your light and encouragement that you've given to women today. I know I'm sure there's more than one woman that's heard this and you've been able to speak to her and give her hope. And if that's you and you want to reach out, please do. Leave a note in the comment for Adria and let her thank her for her bravery in telling her story. It's not hard. I mean, it's not easy, excuse me. Holds Mr. My brain. It's not easy to get up here and share your story. So I appreciate you doing that to give hope and light to others. So thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything else you have to say to close out?
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing me. That was one of the things I told you is that, I don't want people to feel isolated, like I said in the beginning. So please reach out. Please don't hesitate. I obviously am busy taking care of my kids, but I will text. I will, you can reach out to me. I love to just be that person that, that understands what you're going through, and or even, guidance if I can be a guidance or support. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I do want to help in any way I can. And again, thank you, Lauren and Call to Peace. You guys have been awesome. And I know that God will provide, and we will raise that money so you guys can continue to just love on this community and help us as we care for our children and for each other. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Adria. Hope everybody listening had a wonderful Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Thank
So
you.
I'll talk to all y'all later.